So your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed.
So recently, Stephen A. Smith dropped by Bill Maher's Club Random podcast, and let's just say sparks flew. The two didn't hold back. They torched the Democratic Party for its obsession with woke politics and self-destructive policies that, in their words, have run the party straight into the ground. Stephen A. called out the DNC for putting Kamala Harris front and center, saying it was a flat-out mistake. Meanwhile, Ma, the lifelong liberal, sounded like a man betrayed by the very party he once defended. Buckle up, because this conversation was pure fire. Let's get into it, because my point at the end of this thing to Friday is that I'm pissed at the Democrats because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now because you blew the election. I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues, which is democracy and the environment of my two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration, okay? In fact, they're antagonistic to both of them, so I have no champion in Washington. They have the courts. They have the House and the Senate. And you...
My point at the end of this thing Friday is that I'm pissed at the Democrats because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now. Because you blew the election, I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues.
Which is?
Democracy and the environment, to my two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration.
Okay.
In fact, they're antagonistic to both of them. So I have no champion in Washington. They have the courts, they have the House and the Senate, and you totally left me unguarded.
Totally left me unguarded. Ma is furious at the DNC for losing the election and, in his view, sacrificing democracy. I get where his frustration comes from. He's watching his party fall apart, but let's be honest, his pain feels misplaced. What democracy is he talking about exactly? Trump didn't cling to power after 2016. He stepped aside when his term ended. If Maher's referring to the lawsuits against certain media outlets, that's a whole different story. Outlets like 60 Minutes practically acted as Kamala Harris's PR team editing interviews to make her look polished and coherent. So yes, Trump was absolutely justified in pushing back. And as for Colbert and Kimmel, well, what did Ma expect? These guys turned their shows into non-stop Trump-bashing marathons. You can't cry. Threat of democracy when accountability finally knocks on your favorite late-night door. Here's my issue. Generally speaking, we can talk to the economy, immigration, crime in the streets, blah, blah, blah. Here's my ultimate issue: the arrogance of the Democratic Party. I'm saying the same thing. Arrogance of we're saying the same thing in two different ways. The arrogance of the second Democratic Party so Biden doesn't decide to run for re-election. You grease the skid so he doesn't have to go. Through a primary June 27th, he shows up and he embarrasses himself and the positions naturally for the vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris, to ultimately ascend and become the Democratic nominee. But the last time we saw in a primary, she couldn't make it to Iowa. Did you really think that was going to work? Unlike Ma, Stephen A. Smith isn't wallowing in betrayal. He saw the Democrats' downfall coming from a mile away. In his eyes, this wasn't some shocking collapse. It was a slow-motion train wreck everyone ignored. Stephen believes Biden should have bowed out long before things got this bad. The warning signs were everywhere: low approval ratings, dwindling enthusiasm, and a party too afraid to face reality. Instead of opening the field to a real primary and letting voters choose a capable leader, the DNC handed everything to Kamala Harris like it was her birthright. No competition, no debate, no fresh ideas, just blind loyalty to a candidate who never inspired the base. Stephen's message was clear. This wasn't betrayal. It was political negligence. The Democrats didn't lose because of fate. They lost because they refused to learn. Then here's what you did. Did you discuss the economy enough? No. You could have discussed the border. Because unlike Obama, who was quote-unquote the deported, in chiefs, according to the Republicans, because he deported more immigrants than Trump did it, according to not just Republicans, Democrats. There were Democrats who called he deported more immigrants than Trump, which means he just didn't talk about it, but he did it. Stephen A. Smith didn't stop there. He went straight for another glaring hypocrisy in the DNC's so-called fight for immigrants. He reminded everyone that under Barack Obama, deportations were at an all-time high. Obama understood the national security risks tied to unchecked illegal immigration and acted accordingly. Yet the same Democrats who praised him back then suddenly lost their minds when ICE under Trump started doing the exact same thing, enforcing the law. Stephen pointed out how the left went from protecting borders to abolish ICE overnight, all for political theater. It wasn't about compassion. It was about optics and votes. The hypocrisy, he argued, is stunning. When Obama does it, it's responsible leadership. When Trump does it, it's cruelty. Stephen A. made it clear the DNC's stance on immigration isn't about morality or safety. It's about power and pretending to care when cameras are rolling. Biden walks into office and day one you sign an executive order that opens the border, and you let more than 12 million immigrants cross the border illegally. And you don't think that's going to be a problem. You knew that the governors DeSantis and A in Florida, Abbott in Texas, and others were going to sit up there and attack sanctuary cities by busting these immigrants to your city, since you had no problem with it. You were ill-prepared to deal with it, okay? All of this stuff was going on. Now, plenty of Democrats will argue otherwise, but facts don't care about feelings. The former administration's open border approach allowed millions to cross into the country illegally. It wasn't compassion. It was chaos disguised as empathy. By refusing to enforce immigration laws and dismantling existing border protections, they opened the floodgates. Communities along the southern border were overwhelmed. Law enforcement was stretched thin, and the system buckled under the weight of poor leadership. This wasn't some accidental oversight. It was policy by design, and now President Trump is left to clean up the mess. The border crisis, the overwhelmed shelters, the human trafficking surges, all of it stems from decisions made by those who cared more about political virtue, signaling the national security. Stephen A. Smith wasn't exaggerating. He was calling out the painful truth that the Democrats created a disaster they now pretend doesn't exist. And I'm saying, so your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. And you thought that was going to be enough. You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say, "To black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic." And that's the reason why, their vote. The Democrats forgot that basic truth, and they paid the price for it. No, the Republicans don't play that. They say, hell with all of that. Whose turn it is? We want him. Who do the Democrats want? If you ask them today, they still don't know. They said Kamala because it was too late to say anybody else. But you didn't know who they would say if there was a primary. And also because the Democratic Party is ideologically captured by identity politics. That's and I'm totally with you to 1,000%. Listen, I'm a big Bill. Just so you know, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a social liberal. Live and let live, bro. And a freak in the sheets. Give us a call. I do try. I do try. I do try. No doubt. But here's the deal, man. Listen, I'm a social liberal. And what I mean by that is gay rights. Absolutely. Transgender rights and all this stuff. I got no issues with you. I don't want anybody. I'm a black man. I don't want anybody's civil rights violated. I don't want anybody being persecuted in the streets of America. I don't want you being mistreated. I don't want you being denied the same rights that I have. That's fine. But the Democrats took it delivered. The media mocked his bluntness. But voters saw results. Jobs returning, crime dropping, and America standing firm on the world stage. These so-called anti-common sense policies of the left, open borders, soft on crime laws, and reckless spending didn't matter to them. They wanted stability, not slogans. Trump didn't just campaign on ideas. He championed the everyday struggles that Washington had long forgotten. In the end, Maher and Stephen A. Smith simply said what many Americans already feel. The DNC lost touch with reality. They traded merit for identity, leadership for ideology, and reason for politics. Meanwhile, Trump connected with people who wanted safety, prosperity, and pride in their country again. The Democrats weren't defeated by Trump. They were defeated by their own arrogance. Until they start listening, instead of lecturing, they'll keep losing the people they claim to represent. And on this note, we draw the curtains on today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next